That's correct.
All right, so welcome to the discussion meeting, September 24th of the Mount Lebanon Commission. We'll start with Manager McGill, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight's agenda, we will have the acknowledgement of the receipt of the capital improvement program for 2025 to 2029. And we'll set the public hearing for October 8th. We'll have the consideration of the award of a contract to provide professional services to conduct a multi-municipal active transportation plan. And we'll have the consideration of a subdivision plan for a property located at 826 Country Club Drive. The plan will remove an existing lot line.
Thank you very much. And now Gateway Engineers, ta-da. Your turn. Everybody is just dying to hear the update.
Right. The link to again, because I get that, I will give the. So we have been in front of you a number of times to talk about consent order and the sanitary sewers.
Everybody's favorite subject,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Commissioner Grillo loves the sewer talk.
I know,
Um,
totally important.
and we have been progressing through this order where this is one of the largest milestones of this order. Everything's kind of coming to a culmination at this point where, and we'll start with taking a look at a little bit of the background real quick, just reset the stage. We'll go through that fairly quickly. Talk about the larger project that we bid, and we bid that out last year with the idea of getting a jump start on some of these projects, knowing that we'd have some additional work. Go through the grants and the GROW grant updates and where we stand on that to date. And then talk about the additional projects that have been developed and what we plan on submitting in order to complete our requirements. And then lastly, just talk through what the next steps of the order are. Hopefully it's kind of downhill from here until it just starts all back over again. But at least looking at this order, we're coming to the point where we actually have the final project in place. Hopefully we'll be moving forward. The overall kind of background again, there were corrective actions that required that if you're over the gold line standard or threshold, you needed to complete work in order to get yourself down to that threshold. What has been the stance all along is just that you had to prepare a design to get yourself down to that threshold. Mount Lebanon's in an interesting, it is an interesting municipality compared to most municipalities, in that there were 17 point of connections, or the municipality flows 17 different directions where it ties into Alcosan. Of those 17 point of connections, there were 7 that were over that gold line standard or over that threshold of INI, and there were 2 that were tributary to an SSO. I think the last SSO is a sanitary sewer overflow. I think the last time I was here to speak to you, we talked about that overflow elimination plan report that was submitted back in June. With that essentially just had a plan for those overflow eliminations. It was going to Alcosan, and ultimately the next big piece and what is due here at the end of this month is the source flow reduction, how we were going to get to that gold line standard. With that, again, next is an overall map just showing in a map format. Again, here the north arrow is to the left, so if you're trying to get your bearings. Red is any place where we're above that gold line standard. The purple is above the gold line standard, but less than 10% above. So
Just reviewing public above is not good.
yes.
Right.
Above the gold line standard or
Not
above that
what you-
threshold means that we have too much inflow or infiltration making its way into the system.
Mhm.
That was all based initially on the 2008 metering program that was performed. We re-metered the municipality in 2020 initially, And we used some of that information to bring some of those numbers down. That was that baseline due diligence that we talked about. But at the end of the day, this set the stage for where we needed to complete work. As we discussed, the first step and what we talked about last year is getting a head start on this, knowing that the other 83 municipalities were all following along with the order, needed to complete their work by the end of 2025. We wanted to complete a big step towards getting to our corrective actions in 2024. So the project that we submitted in 2024 had somewhere between 22,000 and 25,000 lineal feet of lining throughout the municipality, as well as manhole restoration work. And that was all done. The final project was bid out with a total amount of little over $2.8 million. With that, we did get GROW grant funding for those projects as well. So the GROW grant funding is paying for a piece of that. So we are following the procedures with the GROW grants. With that, just as a reminder, metering will be completed at the end of that project. Again, some of the background as to what that project entails, and you can see actually some of the photos on the right. One is of the lining or the CIPP cured in place pipe procedure as it was going on. And the one above that is for the manhole restoration. Essentially, it's a cementitious coating that goes through the manhole. And we have a lot of old brick manholes that are fairly leaky. There's a lot of infiltration making their way in there. With that, there's also the reinstatement of the service laterals. There's places where we did chimney seals. That's just at the connection from the manhole with the riser ring or with a ring of the manhole, and making sure that we have a tight seal there as well. That's a review, kind of a status where that project stands. And actually, since we put this together last week and sent this over, we have weekly meetings with the contractors. They're progressing. So through that 22,000 lineal feet, there's about 84,000 that's totally complete. To this point, they have lined everything that they were able to line. But in this case, we were going kind of a little bit above and beyond in terms of making sure we're eliminating as much of the I&I as possible. We have mechanical end seal installation. It's just another procedure to make sure that the water isn't falling along the pipe and just making its way in right at the connection of that liner and the manhole. And the manhole rehabilitation, which is the last step of it, as of last week, there were 53 of the 114. They expect to have that all completed in the middle of October, actually October 11th. That date still holds true for the manhole rehabilitation completion. They have a substantial completion of October 16th and a final completion of November 15th. Once the dust settles, once they've completed all the work that's in front of them, we are looking at some of the punch list items or some additional items within these sheds that we can consider before closing the project out.
Danny, is this the first time we are using the chimney seals as part of the lining?
Chimney seals is oftentimes part of, it's not part of the lining process. That's typically part of the manhole rehabilitation process. We have done chimney seals in the past. We actually had some issues previously, so we've made sure that we've updated the specifications and the requirements for the chimney seals. But believes that we've had that in some of the manhole rehabilitation projects that we've done in the past. It's kind of like more of like a rubbery kind of material that goes around that top, and it is ideal in areas where the water's like making its way around that manhole and just getting in right below or beside the manhole there. But we have done it in the past. It was something that we had to reconfigure what we had in our specifications to make sure that we were getting the right product there.
So are they not doing the other 14,000 feet, or it's just that they've gotten to that point?
So that again, that of that 8,395, it's kind of misleading. 8,395 complete, we paid for that 8,395, totally approved. We don't approve it until we have a video that's been downloaded and into the database, and those mechanical end seals have been put in place. Those mechanical end seals get put in place 10 to 14 days after the lining. So as of right now, that lining is probably closer to 20 to 21,000 lineal feet
Got it.
complete. And they're working on submitting all the post data to us and working through the review process. So it's not that that's not being done. It's just that it's not, hasn't been, they haven't submitted it all and it's not officially approved yet.
There was a lag. I'll just comment on the industry, we took, Insituform was one of the first people to ever do this work in the area. They're a national firm. And they came in and they were higher than the person that does most of our other work. But we went with them, but it was a learning process to get them up to speed and get them rolling. So I can only anticipate next year when all of this lining comes out, all the municipalities, it's gonna be a challenge to get it all done. So hopefully
For all the municipalities
Yeah.
across, so that was kind of why we wanted to get a head start on it.
Yeah.
And
So just interesting to me, like the industry, I don't think it's gonna take, I can't reasonably think that they're gonna catch up in a year, get all this work done. There's no way it's gonna happen.
So this clears for the 7 points of connection then, so,
this is a beginning start of 4 of the 7.
okay,
It does get us very close on those 4.
yeah.
We are also taking into account, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more as we go through, but we are also taking into account all the other lining work that we've done. Mount Lebanon has been very proactive, lining and working towards essentially getting the entire system lined. Essentially, you want to redo the entire
Right,
100-year-plus-year-old system. So with that, anything that's been completed since the signing of the order, we're taking credit for that too as part of the project. So we're taking that all into account. These 4 projects that were an initial, we know these areas are bad based on previous evaluation that we performed and taking that all together. And then what we work to right now is finding out, okay, what is left over? What still needs to be completed in order to get us to that? Knowing that we had 3 other sheds, one of which was Painter's Run, which is a very big shed. When we looked at that map, that was the largest point of connection. We've done work in that shed over the years, but knowing that that was a beast within itself, that's the majority of what is left over.
So at some point in the future, when we look at this, right, because there's no flow metering required for the consent order, right? Like to go back to them and say, we said we were gonna do this and this is what it really is. I would assume that we'll get those numbers because we have some of those meters in place, but at some point, probably come back and say, gold line standards X, we're at Y. If Y is still above and we've done all this work, conversation turns to private laterals or other things that we might do after we've finished all the public stuff.
And potentially, and you're doing the rest of the report for me even. No, it's a perfect question because that is kind of where we're at. We are required to do post metering, but one that has been identified from the get-go, and I think of the question that you had asked even previously, like, what happens if we don't
Still
hit it?
not
What
made it,
happens
yeah.
if we don't get there? Knowing that there is such a wide range in terms of outcomes with this, and it gives anywhere from an expectation of removal from 0 to 70% or 0 to 69% you can remove with lining work. So there is a big range of outcomes. All that was required with this order is that you prepare the design that would reasonably state that you're going to get there. And we made sure to do that, and then we were conservative about our approach. We are required to do post metering. That's required to be completed by the end of 2026 to post meter everything that we have. Plus, there's requirements within the GROW grant to post meter. So trying to make sure that we're as efficient as possible in any of that post metering. And with that, they're not saying turn back around, go back out and do what's necessary. All of that will go into a final report, which is due in 2027. Final report culminating of, everything that was done here, all the results. And then the order explicitly states that you work with the region, Alcosan, to develop the next report or the next consent order. And the idea then is that consent order will drop that threshold and that threshold will lower, so it'll give us a lower target to shoot for.
Yeah.
But they did state from the beginning that they wanted everyone to do something. They wanted everybody to attempt to complete the work here. As far as and that's where we've tried to be as conservative as possible with the other understanding that lining the system is never a bad thing. We're shooting to get to that goal of, relining the entire system anyway. So we've tried to stay ahead of that. We've tried to get grow grants, which is kind of like this next summary that we're going to. And at the end of the day, the hope is that we've shown that we can do everything that we can do in order to reduce our I&I. And to your point, there would be a good chance in that next order, then people are gonna say, I've done everything that I can do to remove I&I from my system. We have to look at, outside the public system, since we've only been looking at the public
Right.
system and keeping a blind eye up otherwise.
This is like a big what if question, and I certainly don't want to dwell on this, but so we know that maybe there's 500 transfers a year. Does that sound right, Andrew? Like 600 residential, 500?
Yeah.
It's like if we get to the point, I know some organization or some municipalities that they had the option, hey, let's put that private lateral thing in the code. If we do that, we would essentially be forcing people to make changes on the transfer of property or potentially on if they have problems with I&I. But we have 11,000 residential units, and if only 500 transfer a year, the best you could do is that's like a 20-year thing, right? So, like, do we have exposure there, Phil? Like, if this comes back in 27 and we're like, hey, we're still X number of gallons above the goal line standard, do we get hit with fees, or do they look at all that we've done and say like, that was a pretty good effort?
Yeah, and that's the million or multi-million dollar question.
I mean, thus far, it has been show effort, show spend, show projects that were calculated to do something.
Yeah.
There was some thought that a private lateral ordinance would be required in the last order, and it wasn't. Maybe next time, but again, for whatever reason, like DEP has gotten a little gun shy about mandating that, but they, at the same time, they don't mind it.
Okay. So it's kind of wait.
And there have, like, some of the other people that are a little bit further ahead, like a Columbus, Ohio, they did require it, and it may have been a different situation, might have not have had 83 municipalities that you were dealing with, it might have been a countywide thing, and the city of Johnstown, actually, they did that there too, where they did require all laterals to be replaced.
Up to the foundation wall.
Yeah.
They have like other issues that we don't have to deal with too,
Right.
engineering wise.
Right, yeah, so that, there was different things that pushed that along, plus it's different than, the entirety of Pittsburgh or the majority of Allegheny County. So there is that possibility that they mandated. For right now, we're trying to kind of work within what we can, which is that the public infrastructure and doing everything we can. I think that would be pretty clear that Mount Lebanon is doing their part and kind of going above and beyond to try to meet that. But at some point, it's a good question because you can only squeeze so much blood out of that rock. You can only get so much out where we've identified where that I&I is coming in. We're repairing all of the system where there is high I&I or expected to be high I&I. But what you don't know at the end of the day, and our calculations are assuming that I&I is spread out throughout the system, how much of that's coming from the private sector, the public side. So, at that point, we've kind of done our part, and that would be the argument from the municipalities back to the regulatory agencies next time around, that there's only so much we could do. We can't go any further from the public side.
Right. By 27, we've got 7 figures, maybe 8 into these projects. Hopefully that's.
Showing them that we've
We'll be
done.
close to 50% lined.
Yeah,
That's huge. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I don't know any other municipality that has that much done.
And
So, I mean, yeah.
there's some even within this order that we're seeing where they're in a point where even if they, their sub shed or their shed that is above that threshold, even if they line that entire threshold or entire shed, they would not be able to meet the standard just based on the anticipated reduction rate. So So you gotta assume that there's additional flow making its way in there somewhere.
And there may be other things that happen. I mean, Alcoasand could take and say, hey, we're gonna take some of that flow and put in regional holding tanks before they go into the system. I mean, there's other ways to handle it, like the political side of going into people's basements is difficult. You can, if you get all the water out of the public system and then you're just dealing with the private system, maybe then you can afford to, Alcoasand now owns the regional system, they'll own all
Right.
the lines that connect together. They may do something else. It'll be interesting to see where it falls out. But, I don't think we're in any jeopardy of being in compliance. No question.
I think again, we've kind of done everything that we can. It's once that next order comes around that we don't want to get ourselves in a jackpot where there's nothing else that we can do. And I'll run through these next slides pretty quickly. The GROW grants, we've talked about that, about $1.5 million. The Cycle 9 GROW grant, I just bring that up. Actually, Alcoasand's supposed to have a board meeting here this week. We had applied for Begg Snyder Park as part of GROW grant after meeting and talking to Alcoasand. This is also the project that we received a small water and sewer grant for. Hopefully we'll have both towards that. And actually that project in itself is anticipated to meet that S15 requirement. Talking through a little bit about that project. That one again, we also have a manhole that's overflowing. That next slide kind of shows that manhole that's overflowing there. So there's a few different things that we're fixing within that project. There's a pipe that crosses the stream that we believe is capturing some of the flow. The next page is just that map for where Begg Snyder is. And then getting into the proposed cycle 10 is what we are proposing now. So LOIs for that are being submitted this week and into Monday of next week. An LOI is just a letter of intent to Alcoasand. What we did with any of the remaining projects and these remaining pieces that we need to complete, we're submitting an LOI for that. That way we would apply, if Alcoasand responds favorably, we'll apply for that grant by the end of this year. When the actual application will be due. So we just wanted to make sure we are eligible to apply for any of these remaining projects that we plan to complete. So the additional source flow reduction projects is what we've identified. If you remember initially, I don't know if this was 2023 or maybe even 2022, when we looked at all the work that would need to be completed and more of a back of the napkin approach, we're looking at somewhere around $13 million. Worth of costs associated with consent order repairs, and that was to get to the reduction. That was just based on a cost per gallon removed. With that, we evaluated the entire system, evaluated it by almost a pipe by pipe basis in terms of the I&I that was associated with different sheds or different areas of the municipality. And we proposed projects based on the priority of effectiveness, where we could get the most flow out of the system for the most efficient cost. And this would be anticipated to be bid before the end of this year so that we could be out ahead of some of that 2025 rush of some of the other municipalities. This is just showing kind of the flow isolation. So we chose 5 years of flow isolation that was evaluating the system in the middle of the night to really identify where that groundwater infiltration was affecting the system. We had to use this matrix in order to identify exactly where the worst flows were, or which flows we were going to consider when we were performing this evaluation. One other thing that we did was updating the database, make sure that we had all pipes that had been repaired or new pipes that were already PVC plastic, and even consider the pipes being regionalized by Alcoasand. We didn't necessarily want to put ourselves in a position where we were fixing pipes that were being taken over or that we may not have the ability to fix. Took that all into consideration to really make the determination. And overall, so of those 7 sheds, or ultimately it's 8 sheds, because even the one overflow, we have to perform a 10% project. it was anticipated somewhere, this is still a little conservative, but 30,000 lineal feet of pipe would need to be completed in addition to what we're working on currently. That would increase the total system lined by about 4%. We are also considering manhole rehabilitation as part of that, in the understanding that we have a number of brick manholes that would need to be completed. An approximate cost for that was estimated at about 5 million, so 5 million with the 3 million that we had this year in terms of specific source flow reduction projects would be about $8 million, which is still a good bit less than that $13 million we originally estimated. And even that 5 million based on the 30,000 lineal feet may be a little bit on the conservative side in terms of that cost. We just don't know exactly what costs are gonna look like when we're bidding ahead of this big ride. With that, it would be about 230 million gallons per year that would be expected to be used.
A lot.
Move very quickly in terms of the updated or the future timeline. So we'll have this source flow reduction project report completed. Construction's ongoing. And like I said, we would have those additional projects bid before the end of this year. Required to be completed by 2025. That metering is required in 2026 and ultimately a final report and work with the region to develop the next order in 2027. Overall, what has been done, as we mentioned, about 40% of the system has been lined to date. There's about 808,000 lineal feet of pipe within your system, or sewer pipe that the municipality of Mount Lebanon owns. To this point, 325,000 lineal feet have been completed. Like I said, we'd add about 4% with this project. We took credit for anything that was completed after 2020, after the signing of the order. And there is some multi-municipal coordination that has been completed in association with this, and try to make sure that we're working with our neighbors as we as we perform the post metering, so that we're not metering other people's flows. We kind of reviewed the next steps, but really the final steps will be leading the work, metering of all that work, and submitting those final reports. And then, like I said, unfortunately, the plan is just for that to kind of return again with another order, but there may be other stipulations within that order. They do plan on reducing that threshold, but hopefully there are other avenues in terms of, you know, how to attack that, being that we've done everything we can on the public side.
So Jenny, having been through this once or twice before, you anticipate they'll probably extend the current order?
Similar to what we've done before, I would imagine that they're not gonna turn around in 2027 and have
That's
that
what I
next
mean.
order.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we'll probably have that interim in between, in which there's a process. I think they tried to take that into consideration this time and wanted you to kind of work towards that next order as part of this order, but earliest would be 2028, but it's probably a couple of years from there where they really evaluate who did what in this order.
So we'd have another interim consent order.
Most likely, yeah. And that all goes without kind of being said, that there's still the operation and maintenance plan work that we do where we televise 10% of the system and you make repairs associated with that. So that will all be ongoing. It's just, yeah, as far as exactly when we turn around and start the next order, that it's not defined yet, and that's yet to come. I think part of it, like Dan mentioned, it's hard pressed to believe that all 83 municipalities are gonna get all their work done next year. They've been pretty tight on moving any of those deadlines to date, but you can only do so much if no one's bidding on the project, or if people can't get a contractor out to bid on the project. That's different.
So that leads into my segue, and my recommendation is that we move directly into these next projects that remain. If we're financially capable to do it, if Andrew says that we have the money to do the next group of projects, I say we get them out, get them on the street, get them done before we pay inflated prices for the cost of the work. We're behind the eight ball. You know, we stay ahead of the game. it can only help us in our situation. So, it's still a pretty daunting task to get the rest of that's done and out on the street, but I think that's the goal.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of lessons learned with this first, the first big chunk that we were able to complete. And by getting it out this year, like we did last year, having it ready to go to award, in January of next year, we're a real good head start to getting it all done.
And the fact that you're still in mind, the other thing I want to mention is, I mean, the GROW grants, it's like finding money from the sky because we don't get grants for anything.
Right.
And the fact that it's still available because we have
Right.
projects that are, and they wanna use us as examples, I think it's just a great opportunity.
It's always been a saying that is coming from the Alcoasand ratepayers, but
Right.
still, somebody needs to get that grant funding. And they keep talking about that they're getting a little bit closer to the end of that grant funding, but they actually expedited the schedule so that's why this schedule, we're spending the LOIs now and spending final applications by the end of the year. But we're not gonna wait on any of that. We wanna move forward. And yeah, like Dan said, it's kind of all gravy, anything that we can get towards that. We're even taking the lining projects we've done throughout the municipality and getting reimbursement for that as well. So
Nice.
trying to get as much back as possible.
Any other questions? Okay.
Right.
Moving into the McNeely Fields.
A blast from the past.
Yes.
Yeah, so, there were 3 documents that we submitted to the commission as backup on this item. Specifically, I just tried to put a brief narrative together, to describe the project, and just share my screen here. Next one, There we go. So, from a background standpoint, the municipalities owned this property since about 2005. We first started looking at it in 2002. We did a survey on the property. Ultimately, there was an archaeological study that was required because of the grant funding that was used to purchase the property. In 2002, we did a schematic layout of the property. And I think that's important to identify and understand the big issues related to development here, especially as we look into development in 2024, as opposed to 2002. Environmental regulations have not gotten any less stringent. Let's just say they got a lot more stringent. So basically, the property as it is a valley. It's a big valley that has a water course that passes through it. That water course leads all the way up to Dorchester Road and beyond into Brookline and the city of Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh actually has a sanitary sewer that bisects the property that my mouse is running over right here. That sewer is from a city of Pittsburgh overflow. Their typical overflows are put in because they have combined sewers from time to time that they overflow. The history on this that I learned from Dave Williams, the former Mount Lebanon engineer,
Dave, yeah.
was that the city at one time had planned this to be a separate sewer watershed. In other words, just like we are separate sanitary and storm sewers, somehow that didn't happen. This became a combined sewer shed. So this complicates this whole McNeely watershed because we have Baldwin Township, Mount Lebanon, and Dormont, which are all separate sewer systems, they get combined with the city of Pittsburgh combined sewers. So long story short, that this property has this sewer that passes through it. It plays into our opinion of cost on the project, but the basic layout here is not super complicated. It's classic Western Pennsylvania development. We're going to cut the hill and fill the valley and create pads available for up to, as we see it, at least 3 fields. Back then were contemplated. These could be any type of fields now. It's just the biggest, flattest area that we can create. We had a roadway system to get into the property that was opposite to Walt Drive. If you're familiar with this location, I believe it's the Fasciano building is right here at the corner at DeWalt, and we're just opposite that to come into the site. There's actually a right of way that came through here, and at that point in time, we actually went and got a highway occupancy permit from the county. McNeely is a county road to make sure that we could gain access through that location, and that permit was actually obtained, but obviously never acted upon. For the most part, most of the structures were already demolished on the site. This layout again included the field layout, some concession restrooms, some pavilions, and basically just a big walking trail that's delineated by the yellow line with the dots on it. So I didn't, as a part of this exercise, spend a whole lot of time trying to revise anything here. You know, we could get into all that if the Payne Pond Alba Commission wants to move forward. The one other thing to note at the time was that we did say, hey, we could get more out of this property without walls and other expensive things by obtaining an easement. With that time, we called it the Devonshire property. It's now
Yeah.
Brookdale and Mount Lebanon. So if we obtained a grading easement for a portion of their property, which they're not using, it's this basically hillside. We could actually make our fields bigger to that effect. So three big elements: need the grading easement, City of Pittsburgh sewer that passes underneath the site, and then third element is the water course. As we live in today's world, the DEP very much frowns upon filling in valleys.
Right.
They want to keep open water courses as much as possible. If you do fill in a valley, they make you do stream mitigation. Stream mitigation could be improving streams in other parts of the watershed. It could be paying into a fee where the DEP just takes your money and uses it somewhere else for some other thing. So as we get into the opinion of cost, I can describe more and more with how we try to account for some of this stuff. So with that being said, probably the next thing to look at would be the estimate of itself. So the way we broke this down was basic field layout, this grading, associated activities with grading, some demolition, some clearing, earthwork. It's a pretty big earthwork job, 300,000 cubic yards. Utilities as necessary, stormwater, then site improvements, including paving, preparation of the fields, and landscaping. So those are the major elements for the base part of the project. Getting a little more specific on that, number one item we included was just a placeholder for an easement based upon what we think the property value is up there for that grading easement. I'm not saying that this would be the final number. We could talk to the Brookdale people. They may be willing to do it as some other way, or we could talk about it, but again, it's just a placeholder.
Yeah, we had talked with Brookfield back then about potentially providing some type of a, I'll say, pedestrian connection down
Correct.
to that site as
Yes,
an amenity for the residents.
yes, that would be one thing that we could offer.
You could easily do it.
Erosion and sedimentation control, the big item to note here is that our current ideal and related to what stream mitigation costs, there's about 800 linear feet of stream at $1,000 a linear foot is what the going rate is for that. So that's a big number. Now, Josh, who helped me with this, Josh Scanlon, who you guys know, we talked about that we could do stream improvement projects down along McDonough's Run, which is a pretty impaired stream that leads all the way down McNeely Road. And maybe we could lessen this, or, get some benefit from MS4 related to a stream improvement at the same time, allowing us to develop the field. So there's some play in there, but we try to be conservative with this number. The price of earthwork is just about double. It used to be about $4 a yard. It's now $7 a yard. Site costs have gone at least 40, I've seen even 50% higher than they were pre-COVID. Less contractors, cost of materials, you name it, but site costs have just gone through the roof. On the storm sewer system, we will be required to do stormwater best management practices for something this big, we not only have to do stormwater management where we hold back the water, but they will make us do infiltration. Infiltration means recharge of groundwater. We have to do that through best management practices. There's a number of different techniques that we can use based upon whatever the soils will limit us on. So again, stormwater, between storm sewer, which is just pipes, stormwater management, there's $900,000. Sanitary sewer system, we're just including that we would replace the city of Pittsburgh sewer underneath the site. We're not gonna invest millions of dollars in this thing and then have to rip up an old sewer pipe that's been in the ground for
Right.
100 years. So while you're there, you might as well
Do it.
do it. Could we get money out of the city to do that? Possibly. That would be a PWSA question that if we got into some more due diligence, we did reach out to those guys to see if they had any projects planned in this area, but no response to date. But we can move forward with that. Gas, water, electric, those sorts of things that are standard to put in. The paving, we would just do standard paving, some concrete pavement where necessary around some of the pavilions and stuff like that around the bleachers and so forth. We threw some money in there for signs, a dumpster enclosure. And then under the baseball field, I think that's just like a combination of the whatever special mix, field mix that we would need, fine grading and all those other types of things related to the field development. And then landscaping, I mean, there's a pretty healthy budget there for landscaping. There, again, this could be a place to pare back smaller trees, less trees, depending upon where you want to do the work. But again, we were just trying to follow along, not reinvent the wheel from what had been presented before. Base cost on this was about 5.9 million. Again, at this point in time, we threw a healthy contingency in there. We threw soft costs in there, and came up with a base total price. Now, just as a check, we recently did the Morton Field complex in Upper St. Clair, which is just very much like this. The difference is Morton Fields did not have the sewer to deal with or the stream to deal with. The Upper St. Clair's number on that was about 5.1 million to put in their complex. And that's a recent number just bid last year. So we felt pretty good about the base number at 5.9 with the extra things that we have to do. Again, you don't know until you get out and bid a project like this. We don't want to understate it, but we don't want to overstate it either. But it's, if there's some period of time that we're going to wait on this, again, costs continue to go up. That being, why you do the escalation. So there's still a lot of balls in the air related to this, but I think this is a much more realistic estimate based upon the way things are today. Again, from other projects that we've recently bid, we just threw in some extra things that might be considered, including field irrigation, site lighting, additional building costs, just small concession buildings. You're looking at, several $100,000 to put those in. And again, this stuff could be put in, later on, planned for and that kind of stuff, but just to get an idea on cost. And then of course, turf, turf field is running about $1 million, per field. I think when we did Wildcat, it was in the $900,000 range, even a couple, several years back. So if you didn't do the grass and you wanted to go this, there would be some deduction from the numbers above. But you're looking at, even turfing one of the fields at $1 million. So I'll just leave you with this. I mean, this is a project that I think that, if it is something that the commission wants to pursue further, refine these things further, get better numbers. I think there's some more due diligence, not heavy engineering yet. I wouldn't advise that. What I would advise is that we pursue the city, try to make sure that we know where we are. We would probably set up a meeting with the DEP to do some sort of a sit down with them and talk about the stream mitigation. And then the third thing I would do is just start the discussion with Brookdale on the easement. So if you got more comfortable with those three things, that this is realistic, then you can hone in and feel more comfortable on spending more money on, design at that point in time, if it's a project.
And at some point, we should have a conversation if it moves forward with Baldwin Township, because they'll have sign off because a small corner of that property actually sits in Baldwin Township.
Right, you're right, Keith. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I forgot about that.
So just the pure numbers, around 8 for the basics. another 4 or so for turf and some of those extra buildings, and then, you know, like if we wanted to do more substantial stands or seating, probably a little bit more, so somewhere between 8 and say 13.
Yeah, I mean, sure, absolutely, yeah, that's where you are. Yeah, Baldwin Township ends right at the line here,
Yeah, there's a small corner of that
a
property.
sliver up there, I think, yeah.
It's,
So when we bought this property, it was 2 municipalities then, us, so we bought this property and part of the property is Baldwin, is that right? It's not all us.
The front corner, it's a very small piece of it, actually sits in Baldwin Township.
Is it down here, Keith, right in this?
It's right in that area, Dan.
Yeah, it's down by the little mini mart, there's a
Yep.
mini mart right there,
Oh, I know where that
is
is.
right at the corner, right along McNeely Road.
Would we be developing any part of that?
No, I think Keith's point is, it's like there's right here across, I think that's the line right there.
Yeah, and it's no different than, Upper St. Clair did the Goddard School down on Painter's Run. We had to sign off on that plan because again, a very small piece of that property actually physically sits in Mount Lebanon.
Definitely, but just,
Your point, just when if we get to the point where we're doing plans, just don't include that piece of the property.
well, like, see, we will have to, since it is the whole property getting developed, we will need Baldwin's approval, but they generally don't have a lot of ability to regulate what's outside of their township.
Yeah, I mean, in actuality, this big green area here was staying undeveloped because again, this is where the stream. Remember,
Right.
we're only talking about piping the stream from here to here. At this point in time back when, the biologists felt that we could get the DEP to okay it to this
You
point
left it open
here,
there.
leaving this all open and now undeveloped, so this would still stay natural.
Yeah, and we've had projects over the years in the CIP, as a matter of fact, you'll see it, although it's in year 5 in this year's CIP. And I think that number is about 640,000, but that reflects a couple prior grant applications that we made, which was simply to gain access into the site,
Yes.
provide a very
Yep.
minimal amount of
Sure.
parking, and then potentially create some trails around the perimeter. Um,
Okay, any other questions? Thanks, Dan.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Now, Chief Haberman, floor is yours.
All right,
About that.
thank you. Good, Jackie. Oh, we've got some friends. With that, thank you to the commission again for allowing us to highlight this very important program. And to the manager for all of his support throughout our times, arduous meetings and conversations about it. Obviously, you know, Deputy Chief and this is Jackie Stolten, our newly created Social Services Coordinator. And I just want to take a moment to really thank a number of folks. Really, I have to thank our records department, and I have to thank both deputy chiefs, and especially Deputy Chief Shufi for the work that he's done to stand up this program. I can tell you that it was really a lot of work went into developing it, developing sort of where we were shaping it, what we wanted it to be, and we went through a lot of drafts, and it was a whole lot of conversations, and so I think it really. And again, I want to thank you all, because I know there were times where we all spoke at various times about it. So I think we formed a foundation for a really great program, which we'll hear about. And again, I really can't emphasize enough the good work that the officers of the department do and how they accept this program and how they have accepted it. I should be very proud. I'm very proud of them. They continue to do great work every day on calls involving mental health consumers. And I can tell you, you know, recently, last week, we received a really fantastic accolade for Officer Stawowczyk and the work that she did to de-escalate a situation involving mental health consumers. So I can tell you the officers are continuing to do great work every day. And this, Jackie being here will allow us to really emphasize the next level of resources to deliver to our residents. And without further ado, I really want to turn it over to Jackie to introduce herself to you all and go from there.
Okay, so, hi, everyone. My name is Jackie. So I came here from Resolve, Allegheny County Mental Health Crisis. I'm sure we are all intimately familiar with them. I spent 7.5 years at Resolve. I was only 5th in seniority there in my department, but still. Before that, I was an outpatient therapist at the Chartier Center. And I've done case management with bunches of different populations, did some time in community corrections, worked with homeless veterans, worked with the homeless population, mostly in the South Hills, but also in other parts of the county. So I've been around, done everything and, you know, kind of seen it all. And I'm so thankful that I'm able to be here to deliver these services to the people of Mount Lebanon. And I'm so glad that I have this opportunity to be able to just laser focus and target the people here who really need the help. It's so frustrating to see people who need help and don't know how to access it. And just, you know, as a social worker by training, by education, and by vocation, really, that's my goal. Like, my whole goal in life is to connect the people who need it the most to the services that exist, to the support they need, whether that's a few visits from me to just process a traumatic situation or process something that's happened, or if it's to walk alongside them while they get connected to the services they need to reduce their stress and be connected to the people who can help them the best. And it's not to say that the officers don't help. However, there's limits to what they're able to do. And that's where I hope to come in, to ease some stress on the department and ease stress to the great residents of Mount Lebanon.
I was also impressed to see that there was thought given to you extending services to policemen. And I assume firemen who might need it as well, which I think is important because you guys deal with some crappy stuff.
Yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to doing. When I was at Resolve, I went through the critical incident stress management training, so I can do debriefings at every level. So, and that's something I'm looking forward to doing. Once we get this up and running, I'm looking forward to figuring that out as well.
Jack, am I correct? You also did some work with Shaycog CERT team.
I'm still on it. Yes, I do. Yeah, we had a meeting, we had a training earlier this month. So yeah, I do currently serve on the Shaycog CERT team as their mental health advocate. I'm trained as a negotiator and I provide mental health support to them as well. It's been about a little over a year. So I kind of overlapped with Resolve and them for a little bit and then came over here.
With that, just let me have the deputy chief kind of outline the program moving forward and sort of give everyone an overview on how to reach Jackie moving forward and really how we're going to do everything.
So one of the first things we did was meet with Nick Shallis to set us up with an email address. That's going to be a generic email address that anyone in the social services department can access. So the chief's foresight on this was, if she builds this program, adds interns, or if something happens to come by that she leaves the municipality for whatever reason, this will still be in place and still be accessible. So it's a long-term tool for the citizens of Mount Lebanon to be able to access and to contact our social services program. That's not going to be rolled out until she's absolutely ready to start taking on a caseload. Right now, she's going through what we call a quasi Citizens Police Academy with Corporal Kegarise in the outreach office. So she's going to continue to do that. We're meeting Monday with Allegheny County IT to get her set up on the RMS system that we're currently on. We're going to tailor the RMS system for her to be able to track cases and be able to report back to what you all want her to report about. So that's going to be a great system for her. It's going to be pretty user-friendly. We're also going to have our IT program or our IT department set up another program where she can also track fire and
code and everybody else. So we're moving forward on that. The chief and I discussed, one other thing that the program's going to affect, and that's probably a 10% increase in, and possibly outreach, teams in youth service, 10% increase in referrals from the department. So she's going to be meeting with them. She's going to be meeting with various groups throughout the municipality, setting up at the library, setting up at different events and putting that out there. And we're going to rely heavily on the public information office on that also. So that's going to be next. We're not hurrying her through this process. We're getting her acclimated to the geography of the municipality as well. She's doing ride-alongs with officers, so she gets familiar with the neighborhood, some points of interest and things like that. So it's a slow roll, but because of her experience with Resolve and with CERT and her familiarity with what we do in general, we're anticipating an early October rollout on the program.
Just go back to the original discussions we had. You're not anticipating a co-responder model where she'll go on a call with you. She'll be a resource.
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. The model is a resource delivery model, and it's a lot of front end work. I mean, already we have cases in the queue waiting for her to follow up on. So the way it would look is she would get a referral, whether it's from the police department or from code enforcement or from fire. And she would categorize that based on the severity and the nature and the immediacy, and she would be able to triage those cases. And once that happened, she would then go down the list and deliver those resources and reach out and then have, whether it's a face-to-face meeting or conversation, or invite them to the building. We have a space set up for them to come and meet with Jackie and sit down and talk wherever they're comfortable. And then we can, she can help, again, give them that resource sort of smorgasbord and that's out there that she knows about. And then she can go through that and say, hey, what's appropriate, what isn't, based off of her experience. And again, I can tell you through the interview process, I mean, there was no doubt she stood out. We got the right person, and no doubt about that. So I think she'll be able to shape the program in the right direction. Can't be more excited about that.
So is there any fear for Jackie's safety if, for example, she's meeting with a resident who's having a mental health problem at their house?
No fear in the sense that we have safeguards in place.
Okay.
Again, part of the process we have set up is we have moved some responsibilities away from our community outreach unit to allow them the freedom in case they need to go with her.
Okay.
The other thing we're doing is we currently have 2 officers assigned to that unit. And we've actually sort of redefined a role in our traffic services division to absorb our accreditation program. So what we've done is really looked at the workload and forecasted sort of what they're going to be doing. And we realized that they were overburdened and oversaturated if we included this program into their workload. So what we've done is really reallocated some of that work, and most notably our professional standards accreditation department. And we put the accreditation manager now under traffic services, reporting to Lieutenant Green. And that really took a big lift off of Corporal Gregory. So he's able to have the ability to have himself or his officer assigned to him to go and escort and be with Jackie during
backup,
situation.
so to
Again, just a
speak.
casual conversation, not for any other reason. But again, just we are very mindful for safety.
When we talked about this role, we talked about it as an alternative to having, police intervention or treating certain situations like criminal situations. Those are part of the conversations that came up. Does it present any issues if we have uniformed police attending meetings like that? Do you know what I mean? Like if we're going into a situation where you're meeting with someone, a family, that's not a criminal situation, I'm assuming, that's a situation that's been identified where it would need the intervention of yourself. Is that what we're talking about, sending officers with her?
We're saying if the need be from a safety standpoint, if there were an elevated, so in other words, she's gonna be able to drive that in
Yeah,
terms of
definitely.
her read of the situation.
Okay, so it's not just, we're just sending officers with her everywhere she goes, it's if that report back says, hey, this is a situation, I may need some backup, so to say. Yeah, okay, got it.
It would be case specific, and she's experienced enough to, she'll know the resources. and how to
Got it.
Sort of assess that as a threat matrix.
Okay.
And I can see as the program develops, and I want to give you sort of the opportunity to feel that out, develop the program. Having some interactions with Laura and PIO, to just put some general information out there for the public to try to assist with identification of resources, and those types of, I'll say those types of situations.
Absolutely, and we'll do that. That'll be sort of early in the project. We definitely have that plan. We have, you know, the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
In our forecast. Also, you know, we've again sit on the board with Outreach and Family Services. They're lockstep with what we're doing. So I think this will really be something that in a very short amount of time, we'll look back and say, how did we live without it?
Oh,
You know?
I couldn't agree more. But I guess I was kind of shocked by the 10% increase in outreach calls you expected because of this.
No, we're not expecting. What we're expecting is for these contacts that she's making with people that come forward that have never done so before, that have an issue that don't require police intervention or anything like that. They may contact her through that email, and we may see an increase. It was just a number we threw out there, a conservative number, that we threw out, that there may be an increase to outreach, yeah, for referrals.
When you're rolling out, I assume that there's plenty already in the police department that you've got queued up. So how do you think about, right, that rolling out to code enforcement or to fire, right? I mean, what is, I mean, again, at some point you're gonna say, we're tapped just with police, right? How do you think about, right, that kind of the dynamic of prioritization, recognizing that this is to a certain extent a data sharing discussion, right? There's data that the police department has that no one else should have. And there's data that code enforcement should have that the police department probably shouldn't have, right? I understand that there's data dynamics, but as we're thinking about this overarching program, this is a kind of a quarterbacking role that's going to require some level of data sharing so that we can triage effectively and understand course of action across multiple functions within the municipality that don't, you know, well, the data sets are completely different from a literal technology perspective, but also from just a figurative perspective. So how are you thinking about that dynamic as you start this rollout process? Recognizing that it's in the police department, and that's kind of home base, but there are data sets that need to start getting wrapped in to effectively look across all of these challenges.
Well, you know, I mean, from my perspective, I know the things we've talked about. Imagine it like animal control. We sort of cleared the way to have it as being that model. So essentially, Jackie's direct report is the deputy chief, and there's nobody in between that. There's nobody really, if it's a code call or anything like that, it's gonna be, she's gonna triage that the way that she deems necessary.
Danger.
And she-
Probably,
Right, well,
right?
and a lot of things may require a phone call and, you know, a visit, or may require 5 phone calls. Again, she's gonna be the one to dictate that. But so if you imagine using animal control as a sort of a template, if we do move this into a cooperative model, or if we do expand services, or if we do a shared services model, we're set up to do that. And again, it is sort of autonomous outside of the police department almost, but still, it's something we oversee because we get everything furthest upstream from a 911 standpoint.
Well, I guess, well, I know, I see where you're going with that, but for me, that's a reactive model. You know, the animal control is, there's a animal on the street, go
Yeah,
pick it
and I
up.
guess,
Or there's an animal, it's prompted by a call, as opposed to a systemic issue that is happening in code enforcement, or a systemic issue that fire is aware of, or that teen outreach is aware of, or, right, there's different dynamics that are coming into play that isn't just a 911 call that says, hey, I've got a dead animal on the street. You need to go execute on some action, right? There's kind of this more systemic set of questions that potentially start coming out saying, we've recognized the pattern. You know, code enforcement has information, fire department has information, MERTS has information, maybe police have never been called. But there's a data set. If understood collectively, we say there's an issue here that might not raise to a 911 call, but systemically is something that could be raised for consideration. But that's a more structural challenge as we think about the rollout of this program. And I think that's where I'm more curious. Yes, I understand that there's the immediate rollout of, we're gonna react as we understand there are issues to address. But this offers a more structural opportunity to think about how do we understand where those challenges are to provide support, again, pre-911.
Oh my, I'm like so confused by what you're saying. I'm just gonna say it right now. I'm like, what are we talking about? I mean, to me, the way this boils down is code enforcement sees hoarding and they call you.
Yeah.
I mean, I
That's
don't
about
know.
how I understand it, yeah.
I don't think there's
They can
like,
reach, that's not to say that it's only 911 that can reach out to
Right.
me. It's that I will be accessible to code, fire, and who, and plus the general email, like if somebody says, oh, look, there's somebody I can talk to. Cause there's plenty of people, like for example, when like in Resolve, we would say, you know, this person could really use a case manager, but they don't have any kind of services. Well, that's a whole process to just get a social worker. You don't just get a social worker. But you can reach out to me as a general public or as code or as fire and say, hey, we need a social worker to get in here and do something because I'm noticing a pattern and I'm worried and I don't want it to get to a 911 call. Fantastic, I'll get in there.
And these are discussions that are gonna have to take place amongst departments.
yeah,
So
Like it's
this is all new, so we're gonna have to include
figure out.
fire, we're gonna have to
Right.
include, if we see something that might, if she's out and she receives some sort of a crisis and she says, you know, this might be something that code might be interested in. This is how we're gonna cross-reference all this stuff.
Yeah.
She's gonna keep track of all these calls. And she's gonna have we're gonna have a database in place where we can cross-reference all these things, so.
Well, I think you're gonna have
Report
neighbors who are gonna probably report in and say,
Mhm.
and call and email you and say, you know, this is happening 2 houses down. You may not
Mhm.
know about it. Code may not know about it, but it's going on.
Most mental health response is, it's a responsive
Awesome.
model.
How many
Organic.
cases conceptually can you handle?
That depends, because like when I was a case manager, county mandated 30 active cases, but truthfully, I probably could have handled 45. And that's not even including people just monitoring, so it would depend on acuity, how much I'm doing, it's hard to put a number.
Well, but again,
truthfully, but-
I know you're not aware, right?
It
But
depends,
this has
it
been,
depends on, but it depends on acuity, it depends on what I'm doing, how time intensive someone's case is, does somebody just
Right.
need
Sure.
check? Does somebody just need like a knock on the door, hey, are you okay? Do you need me to just visit
Right.
with you for a couple of minutes until this happens? What do you need?
Right.
Or does somebody just need me one day for just 8 hours to just make a lot of things happen all at once? It's a flowing number. And like I said, when I was a service coordinator, county mandates was 30 with an extra 15 monitoring if you were if you were covering cases for somebody, and that was a pretty feasible number for me personally.
do we have a sense of how many
Hand-
are already queued up?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the numbers we presented to you before, I think we had 85 homes in Mount Lebanon
Yeah.
that we went through multiple times over the last 2 years. So if you look at the last year, that number stayed about the same. So we had, I think about 20% of those we went to 5 times and so if you look at that model, or that data, using the data concept, that would tell you that we have somewhere in that neighborhood of people that need consumer health services, that we are giving them what they need because we've been there multiple times.
Those are non-criminal calls.
Non-criminal mental health calls that our records department identified.
Just shy of
We
20
physically-
5 times plus.
Right, we aren't giving them what they need because we're going there multiple times and we're clearly not, we don't have the widget they need. And this is where Jackie comes in.
And this also includes just the fact that I'm here doesn't mean people are gonna wanna talk to me.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, again,
Because I
Some
can't,
people are very resistant.
I can't force myself. I can
Right.
knock and I can be as nice as I want to, and somebody still can say, so what, you can't get into my house, I don't want you in here anyway, goodbye, and like. You,
Right.
mental health and services and everything are not clinically indicated when somebody is not necessarily involved. And this is not a system where I can be involuntarily forced onto somebody.
Mhm.
So if somebody says, go away, I don't wanna talk to you, and that can already take away 10 people. So,
Well, in our research, we also found the reason why the co-responder model we shied away from was because we found in our research that a lot of consumers of mental health services have just as much disdain for social workers. If they've been in the process, they haven't received the right care as they do to law enforcement
Yeah.
or worse.
Sure.
So if you have consumers who've been in the system for a number of years and don't feel like they've gotten the right help, they actually will shun folks involved in the social work side more than they would a police officer. So we found a lot of research that point to, that's why it's not just a simple answer to deliver services to individuals that have a smattering of issues. So again, I think that getting, the one thing I will say about the data question, that you have, sir, is once we get through this and it sort of starts to take off and has sort of a flow, it will be very hard to, it's almost like how much crime do we prevent question, right? We can't quantify how much crime we prevented. And it's going to sort of lean into that at times, although we're going to lean heavily on data in terms of her time and visits and the time that maybe police officers don't have to be there, or code enforcement only have to go to a hoarding call once instead of 8 times. Those kinds of things will be very, very much able to be recorded and reflected in data. But there is going to be a part of this through the process that she's going to determine her presence will be able to prevent people from, again, going into crisis. And so we will never be able to quantify, I think, all of that. But there will be a big part of it that we're very, that's why, again, the deputy working very, very hard with IT to develop a baseline understanding of calls, and how to record them, how to record time. We're not asking her to bill every 6 minutes, but we're asking her to understand sort of what she's doing in a way that makes sense. So we do have an eye to that, to understand that, knowing that that's something we'll be tasked with in the future.
I think it would be important that Jackie meet Margaret Izzo from Civic Engagement, who does our mediation with neighborhood disputes. She's very skilled at doing it. But, just the two of you knowing what the other is doing would probably be of some value, I
Yeah.
think.
Leaving just what Ann brings up,
Yeah.
in my experience,
Yeah.
some of the people that bring their disputes to what was the CRB and is now community engagement, it's often been an assumption that there's been some mental illness in some of those cases.
Yeah, if you could see some of the letters, you would
Yeah,
know
yeah.
exactly.
I'm sure I can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
I think the CRB and the CEB have done an amazing job
Right.
of bridging that gap, but I think it's been clear in some situations that has been the cause
Right.
of some of the issues. So having that. yeah.
Particularly because the issues tend to come back. So Margaret will report that she dealt with it last year and thought that they had it resolved, and now it's an issue again, so it repeats. And like Craig says, it's oftentimes because we had someone recently who was very sensitive to any kind of sound. I mean, any kind of sound. So those kind of things that,
Yeah. To your comment about metrics and data, I think, like the commission is responsible for making sure that residents' tax dollars are spent wisely and
Right.
appropriately. And, I don't think any of us have ever sat here and said, what's the value of having a police force, right? Like, we're not required by law to have one, but we do because we all know the benefits of that. But or a fire department for that matter, right? And I think we know the alternative is not an option, right? Like,
Right.
let's play with it and let's get rid of 10 police officers and see if crime goes up. Like, that's not a conversation we've ever had and probably won't ever have, right?
No.
But I think it would be good as you get into this to understand what some of those metrics are, right? In the same way that we would the police force, we don't look at like, well, we wrote 9,000 tickets, so we're 4% safer. Like, we don't really look at stuff like that, but trying to understand some metric that would go with your work.
Mhm.
You know, there were so many cases this year, so many
Yeah.
calls, so many visits. You mentioned keeping someone out of crisis. I'm not sure that, you know, there's probably a clinical definition for that. What does it mean to keep someone out of crisis? We may or may not be able to explain that to all of our residents, but it'd be good to have some of that info. I think the implication is that, hey, Jackie has done these things. Without her, those things could have exploded into something that was pretty bad for some of our residents. So I think that works to, you know, prove the value of that work, whatever those metrics are.
Totally understood, and I can tell you 100%, we've had, Jackie will tell you numerous conversations that she's on board about exactly that.
Yeah.
So that is very much in
Yeah.
the forefront.
I mean, It's just our job.
Yeah, no, and knowing that, I mean, again, we're working very hard to make sure we establish that early, and that's really most of what our time has been.
Right.
So we start that early,
Mhm.
baseline and understanding, so just to say that, we do understand that and appreciate your jobs as well, and we are, you know, here to help you navigate through that as well.
Great.
You touched on some of the relationship building, so outreach and the CEB. St. Clair Health is obviously another
Oh,
one.
yeah.
And I would say Representative Miller.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's, as we've noted before, this is not unique to Mount Lebanon, so it's really a national issue, and if it can move forward at the state level with some potential funding opportunities to, again, grow and expand.
Yes. And Dan Miller, Representative Miller does a mental health and disability
Summit.
summit every year, which having a child with disabilities, there are mental health issues oftentimes that go with that for a variety of reasons. So he is probably a good resource as well.
So we'll make sure we connect with all of them.
Yeah.
And sort of put together a roadshow, if you will, with Jackie and the group. We were invited to a mental health summit with St. Clair Health.
Oh, good.
Just so you
Yeah.
know, we have been invited to that in a few weeks. So we're working with Bernard Campbell to put together a presentation on it. And it's sort of an open forum symposium with EMS and fire
Right.
in
Yeah.
South Hills. And so we'll be at that and be able to answer some questions there and highlight the good work that Dr. will be doing.
Keep you busy is what that says. You earn your paycheck.
I'm up for it.
I became a commissioner in 2018, I guess was my first year.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about it since then.
Yeah.
And probably before then. So, you know, we're really excited for this to see how it works out. Yeah.
Very
I know the chiefs and your predecessors worked on this too. I mean, it's a lot of people worked on this for a long
Right, long
time, so
time.
it's.
And I can't sit up here without mentioning our early Chief Barrelman. And I really have to
yeah.
mention you know, these are gentlemen and men and women who really were forward thinkers way before it was cool. I don't mean, and I mean that.
Yeah.
You know, this is 1978. Dave Earlman sat up here and said, we want to create a space where people can be heard. And to say that in 1978 was really, you know, an unbelievable thing. So I really owe a lot to them, and we're proud to carry that on. We really feel, you know, connected to that. And that's something that we will always be committed to for those reasons. And so you're right, though. I can't, you know, emphasize enough, my predecessors and everybody that came before, that they really did clear the path, and
Yeah.
we're only carrying on.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for
Great.
mentioning that.
Well, welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks.
All right.
Now near and dear to my heart, Woodland sidewalks. Ian?
Thank you, commissioners. We've talked about this a lot, so I won't rehash a ton of what we've already discussed. As some background, as we all know, the commission appropriated funds as part of this year's budget to help move this project forward on Woodland. We did an update to our sidewalk expansion policy last year. So on this section of Woodland, and the commission has allocated funding for the whole segment of the streets between MacArthur, where the sidewalk ends, not Shaw Silverstein, but just where the sidewalk ends, leading up to, Foster Elementary and then all the way down to Terrace Drive. So, that whole section, the, engineer's probable opinion of cost, was around $460,000, that we've allocated towards the overall project so far. There are 29 impacted properties, so, back in June, we sent letters to all those properties. We had a neighborhood meeting that was attended by myself, Commissioner Swager Wilson, and Manager McGill, answered some questions that the residents had. I know the solicitor has worked with a couple residents who had some follow-up questions on the agreement that we sent them. So to date, out of the 29 properties that we sent letters to, we've received 17 signed agreements. So there's 12 that have not yet been submitted. So far, only one resident has indicated that they will not sign the agreement. I talked with that resident on the phone, and that resident said to me that they would rather pay the full cost of sidewalk installation and not sign anything with us, rather than signing anything and pay 1/10 of the cost of sidewalk installation. So as
Make friends.
yes, as the solicitor has advised in the past, and Phil can correct me if I'm wrong with my paraphrasing, that at some point, the commission will need to approve a resolution to have the sidewalks go in, especially if we don't have all of the agreements signed and in place. So really, the decision point for the commission is like, when do you want to pass that resolution? We'll keep, reaching out and working with those residents. The other, I'll say 11, because there's 12 we haven't received, but we know that one's never going to give us one. So the other 11 residents, we'll continue to make outreach with. But at some point, we will have to have a resolution on the commission agenda to order these sidewalks in. And then at that point, any residents that haven't signed the agreement will have to pay the full cost versus the partial cost. So in the memo that I sent to the commission, actually twice, because I sent it back in August just as an update when we didn't have time for it on a discussion session then, and sent it again in this packet. But on page 2, there's a potential project calendar. Basically, I work
Yes.
with Gateway so that we can ideally bid the project, around winter time of this year, when contractors are lining up their work for next summer. The discussions with the engineers and just me being the planner, trying to think logically about this, that if we're putting a sidewalk on a street where kids are walking to school, we don't want to do that during school season. We want to do the construction during the summer when school's out of session. So to line us up to do that, bidding it during the winter time would be good. Just to kind of line things up for a notice to proceed in construction beginning in May or June of 2025. But backing up from there, at some point, we will need to know how many residents are going to take part in the cost sharing versus how many residents are going to, basically just have them ordered in on their properties. So I don't need an answer on this tonight. If you have an answer, that's great. But if not, then something for the commission to think about as far as when you would want to potentially see that resolution on a commission agenda. Say sooner.
Yeah, I'd like to know the entire process, like warning letters, what we do before we slam them with the resolution. But during the public meeting, I made it very clear that we would do a resolution. It wasn't, I wasn't going to negotiate it.
We've been talking about this for a while, and it's a priority of the commission to increase the safe walking routes, and the benefit to the neighborhood outweighs the negative sides of one resident that's on the block. It's just, it is what it is.
Because
If I, sorry, okay. From a timing of the resolution, there's nothing that would prohibit the commission from doing a resolution that doesn't lock somebody into whether or not they're paying or not paying per se.
And the resolution gives the resolution more or less orders the sidewalks to be put in. Each resident then is to put them in, or we will do it and we.
So we almost give a deadline to be paid essentially?
No,
Or
the deadline's to put the sidewalk in. I mean,
Okay.
there's, obviously we can put something in there where sign an agreement, we'll do it.
Right.
But that would be, for example, the person who doesn't want to sign an agreement
Mhm.
could at that point put their section of sidewalk.
So Ian's gonna need some direction from the commission on the time.
The way the ordinance reads on chapter 15, section 201. It says that the resolution to order sidewalks in basically orders them to be constructed within 30 days of such notice, or the municipality will do it. So one of the pieces of feedback that we heard from
Yeah.
residents is a little bit of uncertainty about the cost, kind of wanting to know
Right.
what the cost would be.
Right,
So if we put this out for bid in, January and get bids in February,
right,
potentially we would actually have hard numbers at that point in time that we can inform the residents and actually say, your
Your share is.
2% of this cost. Then they'll have a better sense for what their actual numbers are.
Mhm.
So that could be a couple of the holdouts that we have right now of not knowing what the actual cost is. So if I was to make a recommendation, I would say look to do it around like the February kind of timeframe, once we get the bids in and can inform the residents of what their costs are gonna be. So I think the ones that we don't have will probably, feel a little more comfortable at that point of signing an agreement when they actually know what their cost is.
Okay.
That's just my gut feeling,
So early March for resolution? How do you guys feel about that?
Say that last part again.
Early March, to have pass a resolution to put them in?
Yeah, because you're talking about
Because
putting
then-
them in the summer.
We're putting them in the summer, and that way we have an idea of the cost that we can tell the residents what it's going to cost them.
So I'll just turn to the engineer. Does that work for you from a bidding and timing standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, we would want to be on the street early in, the new year, ready to go right out at that point.
Yeah.
Get the bids in January, have 60 days to award them, say the notices to proceed's gonna be in June. Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, good.
I mean, to me, the most important thing is prices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to get in the concrete guys. There's so many limited concrete guys anymore
Right.
that getting the prices early is important.
Yeah,
We had 6 or 7 projects, so the idea would be potentially we would roll after that to the next project, or at least put it up for conversation.
yeah, put it up for conversation, I think, absolutely.
Mobility board has made recommendations.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Go with their,
but
but
you
we
know,
also should be talking about that during budget season, I would
Right.
think. Because there are early costs
Yeah.
that go with it
yeah.
and knowing
Yeah.
what we want to do next.
I assume you saw the recommendation from the mobility board, so that you can be understanding that in the context of price, so that he has the right number.
Well, I think too, yeah, we have, a probable opinion of cost on this project
Mhm.
based on what kind of numbers we've seen, but once we get hard bids in on this scope of a project.
The next one.
Right, yeah.
So with the resolution and sort of the letter to the resident about, we'd really like to do this for you, here, pay up.
Yeah.
I think it would be important to make sure they understand that if they're putting them in themselves, there is a definite standard by which they have to do it. Because I don't think people in general understand concrete and how few people are willing to do concrete. And how they usually start at a base bid of, I'm not touching it unless this is $5,000 or $10,000, so. Just somehow education, a little bit.
That's usually in the ordinance and.
Oh, good,
In the resolution, the
Okay.
standards.
Great.
That's.
just so we pull it out,
would be-
just so it's,
That's part of it.
Yeah.
The asphalt patch.
I mean, it's easy when you don't understand something to think, well, that's easy to put that stuff in. Yeah, not really. So,
It's one thing to pour, put in a little slab of concrete. It's another thing to do base excavation and putting
Right.
gravel and everything else.
and do all the whole
underneath
thing,
it,
yeah, exactly. Okay, cool.
We'll
Alright.
learn lessons through this. The other piece of this that's not here, but will be part of the project, will be those private improvements that we are not responsible for or reimbursing residents for.
Yes,
Or
yes,
Walls that built into a right of
Right.
way, full landscape.
There's a whole list of those on the third page of the.
Yeah.
memo, yeah.
I didn't think there were all that many, actually. I get planning beds, but I mean, those are pretty Yeah. All right. Maybe more than I thought.
I will say just anecdotally, I did think it was interesting that, the 7 or 8 closest properties to the school all sent in their signed
Yeah.
agreements very
Right away.
quickly. And it was
Yeah.
the properties farther away from the school that,
Mhm.
didn't send in as many. So,
Yeah, it's kind of stunning to see that, but, yeah. But some of the ones further down have much larger yards too,
That is,
much larger frontage.
yes.
So. Okay. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you all, and we will
Look at
continue to
March.
communicate with the residents and,
Yeah.
I think probably another memo from us coming soon, letting them know about the process and what the intention is of timing of bids and all that, just to continue that open lines of communication. Probably
Yes.
in line.
Probably the best thing. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Dates from commission liaison.
Quick updates, anybody, yeah, 'cause we don't have a lot of time, we have a full meeting tonight.
I have a couple quick ones. I suspect one or two that I'll
Yeah.
give, our junior commissioner may talk about, so I'll hold on what I think she's gonna mention, but
Okay,
the school board have started an overhaul of their policies. They're working on
Yes.
updating policies, so they're doing that now. Their exec council is working on getting some grants to offset some of the budget deficit that they're experiencing. They have a business roundtable meeting coming up on 10/9, October 9th at noon. You can check the website for more information on that if there's businesses that want to attend that roundtable. And they're starting to gear up for the next strategic plan, so emails will start going out to stakeholders from the school district. The school district will be sending out emails, so residents and other people may start seeing those soon. So we'll hold on to, as long as, are you talking about the national merit? You can mention that or no?
yeah.
little Yeah? She's being shy. She's one of the people who's one of the
Of course she
finalists.
is.
I'll let her fill in the rest. I think she's gonna cover them.
Good. Great. Andrew, you got anything? No, I mean, we're in the middle with MRTSA of looking at shifts and shift coverage. We're having some lots of calls that we can't always cover, so we're talking about how best to do that when we have 12-hour shifts and sorts of fun stuff like that. So I leave that to the logistics guys. Just say, go for it. I mean, what we need to do, so there you have it. Okay, let's move over. We've got a lot of people tonight.